Welcome to What Shall We Say to These Things?
I'm TJ,
And I'm MJ.
and this is your low-key ghetto Bible study.
And if this is your first video, you could check out our channel and go back to the beginning, because we've been studying Esther for a few weeks now, and this episode will make a lot more sense if you go back first.
Yeah, we definitely recommend you check out our intro to Esther, where we give context to the story, and then you can get on chapters 1 and chapter 2, and then catch up where we are today, which is the ending of chapter 2 and the entirety of chapter 3.
All right. So before we start, as usual, we'll ask you to pause the video here and say a quick prayer, and then we'll get into it.
So, as usual, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the chapter in segments. We're going to summarize each segment, and then we're going to talk about what stood out to us from each of the segments. And then when we're all done with that, we're going to talk about what did this passage or the chapter tell us about God, or what did it reveal about God to us. And lastly, we will look at what does this tell us about how we should be living? What is our takeaway? How does this change us? Because the end goal is always transformation.
Exactly. Okay. So, TJ, you normally take us through the summary.
Okay. So last time around, we covered the majority of Esther chapter 2. I think we did verse 1 to 20. And so we're going to start this session by finishing off Esther chapter 2. And we're looking at verses 21 to 23. That's just the last bit of the chapter. So where we left off, we basically had Mordecai, I guess, getting a promotion. That's the impression I get. He now works at the king's gate. And so in verses 21 to 23, we find out that he overhears an assassination plot on the king, and he goes and he tells Esther. Well, possibly not he himself,
but he gets the news.
He gets the message to Esther, and the king carries out an investigation and discovers that this is actually a real thing. There are actually two of his eunuchs plotting to kill him, and so he has them hung, and the events are recorded in the record books, the history log of
his reign.
What I think was interesting to me, and I think it comes back to me as we go into chapter 3, is that he didn't just take Esther's word for it.
That stood out to me. Not in that sense, but that the fact that, and not just that, I didn't think about the concept that it was coming from Esther, but as a king, there's just even a rumor of an assassination plot.
Yes.
I am going to take action right away.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't even think about assassinating me. Don't let a rumor exist. And that was interesting to me. That stood out to me.
And he followed due process. Yeah. He carried out an investigation, and then when he found that they were actually guilty, then they were punished. And that I think I will bring this back up later
on. Yes. I have a note on that as well.
Because I thought it was interesting that when there was a threat on his life, this is the procedure he took. Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. To me, it stood out as a good mark of leadership.
Yeah.
It seemed wise and noble,
which is not necessarily how we've been seeing things go for him.
I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah. So he didn't just take somebody's word for it. He went in and he did the research, and then he made a decision based on what he found. Which I think, like for me, that ended chapter 2 on a. I was like, okay, Xerxes, you good. Yeah, you're in my good books now. Yeah. So that was an interesting end to chapter 2 for me.
Yeah, definitely. This brings something back from I don't know if I should mention it here or in the next one, but this tells me something about Mordecai as well. The fact that he
eavesdrops.
Well, but the fact that he will. Let's go to the next thing, and then I'll refer to it. Okay, that will make more sense.
So I think I have a similar note. Okay, all right. So we're getting into chapter 3, right? And I grouped verses 1 to 6 together. And so in verses 1 to 6, we are introduced to an even new character, right? we meet Haman, and this is a guy that the king has just promoted and makes him his right-hand man. So
Right.
the king has a new right-hand man. And due to this promotion, the king's servants that work in the king's gate are now bowing down to Haman and showing him some reverence, some respect. And this was expected of them because as part of the promotion, the king basically said, when y'all see Haman, bow
Bow.
down.
Yeah.
You know, he's my right-hand man, rever him. And what happens is Mordecai was like, nah, no, I'm not doing that. And the other servants are concerned. Now, I'll talk about this.
Sorry about that.
After, right?
It looks like we're thinking the same thing.
And they're concerned about him disobeying the king's command. And so they approach him and they're like, why are you not bowing down? What's happening? And he basically tells them that he's a Jew. Because all the visions I read it in said that they spoke to Mordecai daily.
Okay. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, they said they spoke to him day after day. Why aren't you bowing down? This is the king's command. Why aren't you obeying? And he was like, I'm a Jew. And so they go to Haman and are like, Mordecai is a Jew. That's why he's not bowing down. Will you exempt him for this? And this angered Haman.
What amazes me is he didn't even know.
I was never going to get to that yet, right? I was never going to get that yet because that's in my notes, right?
Okay.
It made him very upset. And what interests me is that he got so upset that it was not enough for him to get rid of Mordecai. He comes to the decision that he needs to get rid of all Jews.
But that kind of makes sense because the reason they're saying that Mordecai is not giving him respect and the respect he so deserves is because he's a Jew. And so it follows that no Jews are going to give him the respect he deserves. So I think it's a bit dramatic to say, okay, so I'm going to kill them all. But it makes sense that he would have something against Jews because clearly Mordecai is only, according to what these people have told him, not obeying the king's command because he's a Jew. So I could understand.
But I don't know that's necessarily a fair assumption to make because we don't know if any of the other servants were not Jews as well and bowing down.
Wow.
Because I mean, we've been talking about the fact, I think from chapter 2, we've been talking about the fact of how well, and even in our intro video to Esther, we talked about how well the Jews have assimilated in Persia.
Okay.
They've adopted so much of the culture, and so it's not fair to say that this one Jew standing up for what he believes in, right, is a good indication of what all the other Jews will do. Yeah, I don't think that's fair. Okay, so let's talk about what stood out in this portion, right?
Okay. I have a lot of notes on this. Okay, so let's start with Mordecai. I never really paid attention to the section in the beginning of the end of chapter 2 because I thought it was in a strange place. I didn't see its relevance until later on in the story.
Okay.
But in studying these two parts together, I guess it shows me more about Mordecai's character. He's not just disobeying the king's commands for just to be rebellious. He's not. He cares about his king. He will stop an assassination plot. He will not, because he could have he knows something is happening. If he didn't care about his king, he could get in on the plot and he could get a further promotion.
Get a cut as well.
He could get a cut. You seeing that this is not disrespect to his king. Him not bowing down to the king's second-hand man is not disrespect. It's not that he doesn't respect. He doesn't revere his king. It's clearly something deeper than that. It has to do with his integrity. It has to do with possibly his religion, his pride as a Jew, and not pride as in the sense of
arrogance,
right? Pride as in this is important to him.
This
and
is what
who
he
he
believes
is.
in.
This is what he believes in. Yeah, and so that for the first time, I was seeing it in that light, showing him
the contrast.
Right, showing the contrast between him saving the king's life and disobeying the king's direct command. and we get to see that, okay, this is out of character for Mordecai to be disobeying. Something more has to be going on.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think for me it was interesting because he literally stood up for what he believed in,
Yeah.
fully aware that there were consequences. And I think for me that was a nice throwback to Queen Vashti. This is another character we've seen saying, whatever happens will happen. But I believe this is the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it. Like the point you made, right? I have it here. Haman was possibly not even aware that Mordecai had not been bowing down. Like,
yeah.
he may have not even known. Right?
It based on what based on what you read, it looks like they bring it to his attention.
Yeah.
This is the first time he's noticing. He's never, because chances are he's walking around, his head is too high to notice who is bowing down and who is not. He's not even looking at these peasants.
Yeah.
He's going about his business. So that was interesting to me. And I had to be talking myself down because I'm like, part of me feels like those people were deliberately selling him out, but I had to be giving them the benefit of the doubt, because in some versions it sounds like they're looking for mercy for him.
Yes. Yeah.
In some versions you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
will you give him a break, because this is what he believes in, this goes against what he believes, you know.
Yeah. So I have it like they may have genuinely been trying to help Mordecai, but it's just that it didn't work out. It didn't work out that way. Yeah. And I think my final note on this was that Haman had issues. He wanted to take out his problem with one man out an entire population. And it had to have been like serious issues for your pride to have been so impacted by one man's action, right? That you decide that you need to destroy an entire population of people.
I have no whatsoever. I have no evidence to support this. I have it's probably not biblical. It's definitely not biblical. But I would not be surprised if this was just an excuse. You know, like he already has an issue with the Jews.
But I think there's some things that allude to that, because they make point of his heritage. And it looks like one of his ancestors.
Oh, they call him an Agagite.
Yeah, so I think there's some backstory. I didn't get into that because there is one movie adaptation of the Book of Esther where they give you some kind of dramatic backstory.
Yeah, there are lots of theories. They're like he's a descendant of
a king that was killed.
King that slaughtered the Jews, and there are other theories that it's just because as a Jew he's only supposed to bow before his God and his king. There are different theories, but we know whatever the reason, it was it was what you call it. It was important to Mordecai, and it wasn't just part of me wonders if it wasn't just that as well, because it's possible that Mordecai might have known the type of person Haman was, and did not want to revere or put him up on a pedestal when he knew his character.
Okay. Well, that's possible as well. But it still doesn't justify Haman deciding to kill all the Jews. Yeah. You have beef with Mordecai, deal with Mordecai. Okay. So I think 7 to 14 is the last part of the chapter. And so basically Haman goes and draws lots and settles on a date to destroy the Jews. And then he goes to the king and tells the king about this group of people who are defiant and disobedient. And he adds that I'm going to give this much money to the government treasury when these people are killed. Right? And the king agrees, and he gives Haman his ring to seal any decrees that he makes. And so Haman has the scribes write out a decree that on a particular date, all the Jews should be killed. No one would be excluded. So all women, young women, children, everybody has to go. And the property of the Jews that are killed will go to the people who killed them. Mm-hmm. That's basically the agreement. And so the decree is translated and is sent to every province. And it's also announced in Susa. And while Haman and the king celebrate, there's confusion in the rest of Susa. Yeah. So that's how the chapter ends, with the note that the king and Haman are in the palace drinking wine, and Susa descends into chaos, basically.
Where do we start?
So one of the first things that I didn't mention in the summary, but I noted in one of the versions that I read, is that this happens in the 12th year of the king's reign. Right? Okay. And based on what we've learned in the previous chapter, Esther became queen in the 7th year of his reign. So that means Esther has been queen for 5 years. Right? That's my math, right? And somehow, even though she's been queen for 5 years, the king still doesn't know that, well, not necessarily the king, but there seems to still be this lack of awareness that she's a Jew, right? And for me, that raised several questions about the way she was living, because it was one thing to play the part of a Persian for a year, but to continue to play it for an additional, I guess it becomes easier with time.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but and we had this whole conversation about it in chapter 2.
Right.
Yeah, the last chapter. So for me, it was interesting to note that 5 years down the line, nobody's still is that English? no one. There's still people are still in the dark about the fact that she's a Jew, right? Yeah. That for me, that was interesting to note, because it was just
a little questionable.
Yeah. As a good Jewish young lady, in contrast to her cousin Mordecai, who is refusing to bow down because he's a Jew. I thought it was just an interesting juxtaposition.
Okay. What do I have? What are my notes on this? The money part. That was something I had always thought about it as in, this is, which brings me back to the point of either Haman went and did his research, or he has had a problem with the Jews. How does he know how much money? That I've always, okay, let me start over. I've always thought that the money he promises to put in the treasury is going to come from the Jews. I didn't think it was out of his pocket, which now that I've read it more closely is possible. Right.
Yeah.
But in thinking that, previously I always thought he was going to get it from the Jews he killed. And I'm trying to figure out how he has an idea of what their net worth is for him to put it into the treasury. But reading this, it seems that he's going to personally fund this. Yeah. And that is crazy to me. It makes sense, because if you know Xerxes from chapter 1, he cares about, but he cares about money. He cares about wealth. So this is a great approach to take. I'm going to put this money into the treasury. This is going to make you look good. It's a great approach for Xerxes to come to him with money, right? But it literally seems like a transaction now. I'm going to give you this money so you can kill these people. And that made it so much more nefarious and like evil.
Like the thoughts I had were like, this is the chapter where the music changes in the movie. Like, this is the ominous music, because this is like clearly the bad guy.
Yeah.
But based on what you're saying, okay, so let me just backtrack like one step, and then I'll come back to comment on what you're saying. My point here was that Haman chose a date before he even went to the king.
Oh wow, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, he chose a date, and then he went to the king, and but basically, I was like, that is a level of confidence and surety that I aspire to. Not in terms of being a bad person, but like just like, I'm going to choose. I should probably do that. Like, choose a day I'm getting married, and then go and look. You understand?
Yeah.
But that's basically the vibe I got. Like, he drew lots, picked the month, picked the date, and then went to the king.
Gets permission.
Right? Yeah. Okay, so now back to your point, right? I want to think that, like, because the king doesn't question anything he says.
No.
Right? Which was an interesting contrast to me to the assassination plot. But no,
okay.
Right?
Okay. No, Yeah, I get you. That makes sense. I didn't think about it in that way at all.
But here's my thought, right? He had no reason to question anything, because here comes Haman appealing to two of his biggest things, right? One, if we get rid of these people, I'm going to give you money. Two, let's get rid of these people that are not obeying you.
Mm. Well, he's done that before. Vashti doesn't obey me, but obey him. He gets rid of her. This is his MO
Right.
at this point.
And so I think it was in appealing to those two aspects of his pride and his ego and his treasury that he was like, this is a win-win situation.
It's to me, we see that in the last verse when we say that Susa goes into confusion, because he's when we see him investigate the assassination, you get the idea that he's not bloodthirsty. He's not the kind of off with their heads kind of king, and so this does seem out of character, and you could understand why the whole city goes into confusion, because if he's in the habit of just killing people all the time, everybody's like, okay, these are the new victims. But for people to be confused, it gives the idea that this is out of character for him, and that makes us believe that Haman has thought this through. He's like you saying, he panders to exactly who Xerxes is. He needs obedience and he needs money, and it kind of it shouldn't.
He's a good politician.
Yeah, it kind of helps me have a little more respect for Haman, like, because I've never thought
Respect? That's the word you want to use?
in the sense that I always thought he was just, he seems like a spoiled brat, throwing a tantrum, but he is just he's put thought into it.
Methodical.
He's methodical, he's calculating, and respect, not in the sense that I want to be like him, but
there was method to his
there was
madness.
method. And I think Mordecai, this is jumping ahead, but everybody's reaction, Mordecai finding out he's behind it, it makes sense that his reaction, Mordecai's sorrow and his grieving, it makes sense
in light of
understanding that Haman is not just somebody with power, but he has he's systematic, and he is also, he has a brain, he's using it. And I think that had Mordecai understand that the Jews were really in trouble.
Okay, I understand. But on that note, my final point here was that we don't know that the king even knew that the Jews were the target.
Yeah, because Haman goes a certain group of people, and so like we established in our introductory chapter, that there's so many different provinces in Persia, so there's so many different groups of peoples, different races, different with different languages. So the Jews didn't have to be the group he was talking about. Yeah.
Anything and any other points?
I think I've exhausted everything. My last one of my points is that here we have Xerxes drinking again. Yeah, like he might have a problem.
Yeah, I think we had a conversation with our father about it, and he was like, leaders should not get drunk.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I think we've delved into the chapter, and we've learned a few things. Yes. Yeah, it was an interesting chapter.
Yes,
I didn't expect it to be.
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah. Okay, so you usually have the best point on what does it tell you about God. So you go ahead and share with us.
This, as usual, the what does this tell me about God was difficult. But what I have down is that God intentionally distinguishes his people from everybody else.
Yeah.
So the only reason Haman is able to say there's this people with their own laws, and they believe different things than us, they behave differently to us, is because God had given
A peculiar people.
right. God distinguishes his people from the people around them, and I want to believe it's so that they'll stand out and attract other people to them, and thereby bring people to him. Yeah.
I think for me, mine had to do with the fact that sometimes he allows really horrible things to be in the works. And I think it's sometimes it's a moment for faith building. And I think we get to that in chapter 4.
Yeah, I think so.
And sometimes it's a time for like full dependence. But again, that comes in chapter 4.
Yeah.
So what about what it tells you about how you should live your life?
Okay, so this one was a little all over the place. I think I have 3 distinct points. I think it brings back watching Mordecai stand up for what he believes in, brings back the whole integrity, like we saw with Vashti. I think that's definitely a way I want to live my life, no matter the consequences. This is what I believe. This is what I need to stand for. This is what I need to live by. That's the first one. And also, so there are four of them. Just because somebody's in a position of power does not mean that I automatically need to. I think we should respect everybody as humans, but I don't think I should look up to or idolize or revere people just because they've been placed in power. And Mordecai exemplified that as well.
I didn't think of that. That was a nice one.
And then what stood out to me, it became so easy for Xerxes to be like off with their heads, because Haman came not saying these are your citizens, these are people just like us, but he created a distinction. And I think it's very easy for us as humans to separate ourselves, right, and attack another group of people if we're looking at how they're different from us. And if we change our approach and we try to understand other people, we try to see where we have similarities, where we I guess intersect in our beliefs and in the way we live, I think it becomes very easy to love each other
and not want to kill each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, that's it.
I'm the last one. I don't know if you already have it. I have is that being different is going to single you out. And that's something we'll have to be okay with.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so my points had to do with, both of them had to do with Mordecai.
Okay.
And doing what he thought was the right thing. Because at the end of chapter 2, we see him finding out the plot and telling Esther, getting the word to Esther about it. And I think sometimes we do what we think is the right thing with the expectation of reward or praise. And we have no documentation of him getting either. Yeah. And so for me, it's a thing about doing the right thing because it's the right thing, with no expectation or praise. And then in chapter 3, we see him doing the right thing, aware that there may have been consequences. And
negative consequences.
Negative consequences. And then the thing that really hit me is that the negative consequences were not just for him. It began to impact the people he cared about. Okay. And I think sometimes I need to be aware of that sometimes even when I choose to do the right thing, it may not just be about me, like the negative consequences. Yes, sometimes the people I care about may benefit from me doing the right thing, but sometimes me choosing to do the right thing may put the people I care about in difficult situations. But that should not deter me, I guess, from choosing to do the right thing. Okay. My final notes was one that I should have added into our discussion, but I thought about it after the fact and I made the note. And we spoke about this last night. And basically is that the king's pride and listening to selfish people almost cost him 2 wives. Like, he almost lost a second wife, right?
Yeah.
Because of his pride and listening to selfish people. But that's
It looks like he's not learning. Yeah. I don't know where he's getting these advisors from. I don't know why he hasn't figured out how that he shouldn't be listening to them.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this week's discussion.
Yep.
Again, we want to say that our comments are open. We want to read your thoughts. We want to know what stood out to you.
Yeah, and what your answers to the 2 questions are. If you came up with any other things that you could learn about God from these passages, or about how we should live our lives, we are interested. We're curious, so let us know.
Thank you to Auntie Claudia for always leaving her comments. We see them. We appreciate them.
Thank you.
We love you.
Yes.
And join us next week when we get into chapter 4.
Yes. And we're doing the same thing. Let us know what the passage teaches you about God, and let us know what you can learn about how you should live your life.
Yeah. And again, leave us any recommendations for future chapters that we should get into. Not chapters, books.
Right. Okay. So this has been What Shall We Say to These Things? I'm MJ.
And I'm TJ.
And until next time.
We're out.